So we'll immediately shift to the next presentation, and next is the symposium on hernia. I'll invite Dr. Athole to introduce the next speaker, who is Dr. Neeraj Raite.
Good evening to all of you. Dr. Neeraj Raite, as you all know, is a GI surgeon and has got a special expertise in laparoscopic and bariatric surgeries. He has done, after finishing his medical education in India, he completed his advanced training at Athens Medical Center at Greece. He has co-authored books on minimally invasive surgery in gynecology and oncology and esophageal cancers. He has conducted several live demonstrations and live workshops, and where he has relayed and broadcasted his workshops to the international audience in US, Turkey, Italy, and Singapore. Without wasting much of time, I would request Dr. Neeraj Raite to start with the moderation and start the symposium on hernias. Dr. Neeraj.
Thank you, Dr. Virendra. Esteemed honoraries of Pune Surgical Society. Because of current COVID crisis, we had to modify our prior understanding and arrangement of symposium into lectures. So instead of symposium or panel discussion, we will be having 3 lectures done by 3 of us. I'll start with the basic, with the ventral hernia and controversies in ventral hernia. Then I will invite Dr. Kedar Patil, who will speak on open transversus abdominis release. And then Dr. Suprashant Kulkarni will speak on ETEP. So I'll start with my part. As we all heard, great speakers like Dr. Pradeep Sharma sir and Dr. Roy Patankar sir, probably a lot of my expressions in ventral hernia would try and match their thoughts. And this is how I believe surgeons perceive any ventral hernia patient. This is how a surgeon perceives options of treatment for any ventral hernia patient. For some who are trained conventionally, they still are strong proponents or believers of open ventral hernia surgery repair. For some, there is an open ventral hernia patch which is available. For many, there is a laparoscopic mesh which is available. And since 2018, good amount of our Indian colleagues have started moving themselves to ETEP and TAR. So it all depends on how we perceive a patient of hernia. And many times our perception of a patient of hernia depends on our competence of doing hernia surgeries. So it holds true from the perspective of a patient also, because if we are not exposed or trained adequately enough in laparoscopic ventral hernia surgeries, laparoscopic ventral hernia surgery can be evil for a patient. So the argument continues whether the surgery should be done open, whether the surgery should be done laparoscopic, or whether the surgery should be done robotic these days, and which should be the right approach for which hernia. So we all know this general hernia classification where ventral hernias are broadly divided as incisional and umbilical, and the other groin hernias classification. And I don't want to go into the details, but I would like to touch upon few common controversies which exist in this domain. And I would love to share my thoughts on it, or as sir said, our experiences linked to the evidence. And I would love to also know your thoughts on it. How can we repair any ventral hernia? Conventionally by open method, where we all know these are the options which are available, and by laparoscopic method where we place an intra-abdominal mesh, or these days by using ETEP approach. So I don't want to proclaim or substantiate any one approach to be the right approach, and maybe every approach has its own pros and cons. For me, any hernia factors to consider include: what are the recurrent rates of any option of hernia treatment? What are the chances of infection if we do a particular procedure for our patient? what are the short-term as well as long-term patient outcomes from recurrence as well as from pain perspective or from recovery perspective. Is those options cost effective? As Dr. Roy sir said in his lecture, open groin hernia for a direct unilateral hernia can be equally or sometimes can be a better option than doing a laparoscopic inguinal hernia repair. And what is the difficulty of repair for a hernia? Because the difficulty of repair may not be only dependent on the anatomy of that hernia, but also may be dependent on the training of the surgeon who is going to do the hernia repair. So since I do good amount of laparoscopic ventral hernias, probably I am more inclined or biased towards laparoscopic ventral hernias and feel following are the advantages and the disadvantages are very limited. And I don't want to go into that common debate of what are the advantages and disadvantages because we all know them by now. The dilemma starts from the workup of a patient. How many of us as surgeons really advise a scan or an MRI to a patient of a ventral hernia? And I believe we should really think and we should really respect the thought process of our surgical colleagues or the new ones who have come into the field, because we know that good amount of them are regularly advising a CT abdomen for a ventral hernia, and they are experts in reading the CTs on the console. So maybe I believe our mindset of shifting from a basic ultrasound to a scan based on the patient, on how bad the hernia is, how large the hernia is, how wide the hernia is, would definitely add a good amount of value when it comes. If it's a previous hernia surgery, maybe there would be a definite role of MRI also, then because we would be able to locate the location of the mesh and the relation of the mesh to the defect, and that can give us a good hindsight about what has done to the patient. So maybe most of the times an ultrasound, but yes, a CT and MRI should be kept in our mind in good amount of patients when we plan procedures. Let us go case by case and solve this dilemma, which I face in our day-to-day practice and which all of us must be facing in your day-to-day practice also. Here is a patient who is a 50-year-old male having an umbilical hernia of defect size 3.5 centimeter with an omentocele reported on ultrasound. What would be our procedure of choice? And if here in our August audience, we have 15 people who are attending this lecture, I'm sure we all will not have a consensus on a one procedure. I hope everybody of us agree here. So it does differ from individual and it does differ based on evidence. If you ask me, my procedure of choice would be definitely an IPOM plus, provided the patient is not obese and provided, although the defect size which is reported on an ultrasound is 3.5 centimeter, but visibly is not very wide associated with divarication, or the umbilicus is not malformed. Because if the umbilicus is malformed, even if I repair the hernia laparoscopically, I may not be able to give a good cosmetic outcome to the patients for his umbilicus, and probably then his satisfaction may not be very well. Let us come to a second case. Now here is a female who has undergone 2 pregnancies, both of which were cesarean sections. She comes to us with a midline infra-umbilical 4 centimeter defect. Her scar is a vertical C-section scar. Now here, because of her poor postoperative recovery, she also has, and poor postoperative nutrition probably, she also has significant amount of associated divarication of recti. She does not have any comorbidities. And here is a question which I will like to ask each one of us. What would you do? If you ask me, I would probably not rely on laparoscopy, although laparoscopy can bring closer the divarication of recti, but invariably these females also have good amount of loose hanging skin, and their abdominoplasty can give a good cosmetic outcome, is what I believe. The questions which we'll face in this kind of patient is, should we really do open or should we really do lap? What should be the defect closure if we are going, what are we going to do for the defect closure if we are thinking of doing a lap? And what mesh would be appropriate for this patient? and in which plane we are going to place the mesh. In my case, in this patient, I would have placed a retrorectus mesh, and I would have still combined this procedure with an abdominoplasty to give a good cosmetic outcome and obviously a good patient satisfaction. Let's have a third case where we have a patient whose BMI is 35. Patient has come to us with complaints of umbilical hernia, and he has uncontrolled diabetes. Most of us would be compelled to treat his umbilical hernia, but there is high chance that we may not be able to get good outcome when it comes to long term, because we routinely come across these patients in their long term follow-up having recurrence because of their severe diabetes as well as obesity. So the questions or a dilemma which all of us face is there any role of bariatric here? If it is, should we combine his bariatric with his hernia repair? If we are combining his hernia with bariatric, what kind of repair we can offer? So at our unit, we have a practice that we definitely do offer an option of bariatric surgery to this patient, and we discourage them for an isolated umbilical hernia repair because his bariatric would give him a good sugar control. But we will definitely consider repair of his hernia by conventional open method so that the plane of bariatric surgery would remain intraperitoneal while the plane of hernia repair would be extraperitoneal. Whether to use mesh or not would be a dilemma we'll still face. We have enough evidence where people have used mesh combined with bariatric surgery. If at all we are using mesh in these patients, we would explain them a possibility of a mesh infection or explantation, but we would definitely prefer to combine this procedure and explain the patient the need of bariatric surgery. Now let us come to the fourth case where this patient is a 40-year-old female having an umbilical hernia. And incidentally, when you send this patient for sonography, she has gallstones. What will I treat first? Can I use mesh if I am going to combine this procedure along with gallbladder? And what if the patient wants both the procedures simultaneously? This is a dilemma all of us face. What we do in our practice is we try and understand what are primary complaints of the patient. We inform them about the findings of gallstones and the need of an elective cholecystectomy if the stone size is significant and they deserve cholecystectomy. There are incidences where we have done cholecystectomy first and the repair of umbilical hernia in the second sitting. And there are incidences where patients have opted for both the procedures together, where we have done cholecystectomy and done suture repair of their umbilical hernia with a clear-cut understanding telling them that there is a possibility of recurrence which we can deal in the second sitting. So friends, I don't want to extend the lecture, and because we have two esteemed speakers following me, to conclude, no procedure suits every patient. In hernia, defect size is probably the most important thing each of us should look for, and their contents and the adhesions, if it's an incisional hernia, are something which all surgeons should keep in mind, because in over-enthusiastic laparoscopic adhesionolysis, if we injure the bowel, then there is no hope of using a mesh for the repair. So we have to ask ourselves, is this a roadblock to us to convert from open to hernia, open to laparoscopy when we start doing more of laparoscopic surgeries? Does laparoscopic surgery spell the end of an open surgeon? And in my personal view, the answer is clear-cut no. Because in today's cases also, we see that there are good amount of indications for doing open surgery. And we have our speakers following who would be telling us and role of open surgery in a hernia repair. Skills of open surgery are indispensable. But the dictum is open many patients once than one patient many times. Thank you.